What's going on, Dan K Show fans? Welcome back to the Dan K Show. This is another installment in our series, which is apparently we started the year as Podcast Boys. Now we're Transparency Boys. A lot of folks reaching out to us, congratulating us, thanking us for talking about the issues that we think are important. And one of the issues that I think is important is an introduction. An introduction for a man who lost his turquoise shorts and replaced them with a turquoise polo. It's Dan K. Dan, turquoise is your color.
Thank you. I am excited to be back in turquoise yet again. For the folks who don't know the stories, you'll never learn about Dan and his turquoise short. You have to find some people who know me well to learn those stories. Tales of greatness of yesteryear for Dan K, a younger man and a
fleeter of foot.
Fleeter of foot and fleeter of responsibility at that time in his life. But now, Lucas, we got a lot of responsibilities, and we do the mess around now. Okay, we open up with a little something that just introduces the folks to us. And I'd love to talk about the delicious sauce that I've got boiling on the stove right now, but I can't. Because, Lucas, I don't know if you knew about Dan K's Frog Gate that just occurred recently.
I did not.
While you were enjoying your time and your story that you'll probably tell of where you have been, Dan K went to his bathroom in his office here at home, his home office. And like any other day using the restroom, everything is fine until he heard a ribbit, a loud one. He looked into the hole at the top of your sink, your drainage, right? Just in case you were ever to overflow your sink. And he saw a big bellowing breathe of a frog. And not just a small tree frog, which he thought it was at first, but a large frog. I'd like to thank the people here at Stillwater Palms for absolutely nothing. I made 3 phone calls to see if they could help me take the trap out from under the drain. They were like, sure, we'll get there. Never did. So 2 days of living with this frog go by. I then had to take measures into my own hands. So what I did, rather than taking the trap out from under the sink, what I did was what I like to call the flood 'em out technique, waterboarding for a frog. So I closed the drain on my sink,
right,
and I dropped into the drain around the frog because you couldn't get him; it's too small. The hole's this big, the frog's huge. So into the hole, I dropped down some Saran wrap to fill the trap. Overflowed the sink. Overflowed into the hole. Kept pushing water in there, shut the lights off, walked out. What do I hear but a frog having the time of his life in my bathroom sink? He's swimming, he's splashing, he's ribbiting, he's jumping. I turn the lights on, we make eye contact, he's embarrassed, I'm embarrassed. I have to jump on top of this frog, grab it with my bare hand skis. I'm running out the door like a wild thing, bouncing off of walls. I go to toss the poor guy out, and he just went flying. Luckily, I had to check in on him. He was okay. He was bouncing away after a 2-story fall that was accidental on my part. I meant to put him outside. He took a leap before I could put him down and flew himself into the sky. He's okay. I am okay. My sink has seen better days. I had to take the trap apart anyway just to clean it up.
That, I think, might be what the Dan K Show mess around was designed for. That is a classic Dan K Show mess around. You versus a frog.
2 days of living with this guy. I go into the bathroom, I'd say hello to him. He poked his little nose out. I tried to grab him a couple times, but I didn't want to hurt him.
No.
I'm an animal guy. Dan K animal lover. I'm not going to hurt the frog. So I'm trying to keep him safe. I honestly thought about feeding him for a little bit, keeping him in the sink and making him my sink pet. But in light of the Mr. Peanut news and some other terrible things happening in the animal kingdom, I saved the frog. I got him out of the house.
I'm glad you were able to get him out of the house. I'm glad that there's a happy ending. That frog is going to go back to his frog buddies and be like, I flew. You can fly too if you believe hard enough. That's an inspiring story now.
Yeah, in Florida, it's certainly a thing that happens where you get reptiles, amphibians, and the likes of which you don't want in your home, inside your home. And that was certainly an amphibian I didn't want in my home. He was chill, though. Super cool. Big frog.
Well, now my story feels pales in comparison, but I just finished up two and a half days in Vegas for my younger brother's 30th birthday party. Alex, some know him as Jonesy. He's been on the show before. If he's 30, I think that makes me officially old. But we were there for 2 days. We unfortunately did not put the sports book out of business, so they survived yet another round with the boys. But it's always fun. It's always fun to get out there and see family and celebrate some milestones. I remember 30. Do you remember 30, Dan?
Nope.
No, I don't either. Well, that is the classic Dan K Show mess around. One other thing I wanted to point out is we are working on some awesome NCAA themed content that is going to be coming out in December with some real heavy hitters in the hockey industry. This is going to be more of a serious mess around with some very serious people who have decades and decades worth of experience. We're excited to bring that to you. We'll tease that over the next couple weeks, but keep an eye out for that. Dan, I think it's time to move into our first of two topics today. This is kind of a big one. This came across our radar kind of separately, and then we started piecing it together. Two sources, one from juniorhockey.io and Steven Heisler, was what I saw initially. And it was talking about former head coach of the Rock Springs Grizzlies, Darren Naylor, and some history with him, not just over the course of the last couple of years, but also more recent. And then a post from Greasy DC Hockey that was taken from the Rock Springs Instagram page that was talking about the essentially reassignment of Coach Darren Naylor. If you haven't seen it yet, essentially this starts on October 31st, a Halloween game against the Casper Warbirds. The source that Steven Heisler cites says that Thursday night after a loss at an away game, players were told they had 15 minutes to get undressed and onto the bus or they would be left behind. This is from a parent cited in Steven Heisler's article. Quote, "This is not the first time this has happened. Also on that night, there was food on the bus, but players were not allowed to eat or even talk to one another. My son returned to his billet home at 2 a.m. and had to cook food to eat with his teammate. Instead of team building, Naylor pits these kids against each other. Luckily, now the players all know it's them against him and not each other." Further, the quotes from the Steven Heisler article are, "Other parents are saying the coach does not have the legal authorization to even work in the United States. Maybe because he's part owner, that's how they're getting around it, but it does not make sense." Then when you put this together, Dan, with the story that Greasy DC Hockey posted from the Rock Springs Grizzlies announcing a, quote, "management shift to help facilitate the continual advancement of ice hockey operations." Effective immediately, the Rock Springs Grizzlies have realigned their operations, with Darren Naylor serving as the Grizzlies GM, while Brad Zangs receives a much-deserved promotion to interim head coach. Explained by Wes Musio, "I am currently investigating several opportunities in Canada and the U.S. to expand my ice hockey venture. Darren Naylor, who I have respect for, needs to focus on these new ventures that I hope to bring on stream for the 25-26 hockey season." So, Dan, what we've got is a really interesting story from a head coach of the Rock Springs Grizzlies taking out a loss on some players and then very quickly being, quote, reassigned to some other operations inside Canada. I mean, now that we've set the stage, what are your kind of initial thoughts when you saw these two pieces of news?
Look, right, wrong, indifferent, truth, fiction, whatever it is, right? You never know in these moments. There's so much on the line in the game of junior hockey for players, for families. Players are away from home. Families are away from their athlete. There's so much on the line, right? When accusations like this happen, the right move is to step away. The right move is to create that space, allow for the league, allow for those folks in power to investigate what has occurred, investigate what has happened, and come away with answers. In these cases, you hope you get those answers, especially for those parents who are reporting this behavior. I am someone, Lucas, who has played for people who were old school mindsets. I am somebody who has played for someone who is a new school mindset. And there are positives in an old school mindset when they are waged in a new idea, right? And that's kind of what I always think about. Depriving children of food is never okay. Depriving children of an atmosphere that they feel safe in when they are away from home, as we just addressed, is never okay. And that's kind of where I stand with it. One of the things I do want to point out, Greasy DC Hockey, I don't know who's running it, but my gosh, they've got some stories on there and some content, and they have come out of nowhere. Gotta imagine it's a young player doing that. And I mean, social media future for whoever that is doing it. They have gotten a following quick.
Yeah, I mean they kind of started, in a similar sense of the USP show account,
Yeah.
just posting clips and things like that, but they have sort of morphed into a real legitimate reporting outlet for what's happening in the NCDC. That's where this started for us. So 100% right. I think it's one of those things, at least my reaction to it is I agree and I like that there's obviously a step taken away from the program here. You would have liked to see a little bit more responsibility taken, right? I never like the reassignment under the guise of something else. I think that feels like you're trying to have your cake and eat it too, to do the right thing without taking the responsibility. Obviously, these are sources coming secondary to us through Steven Heisler, number one, and the Rock Springs announcement, which is a direct quote from their organization. But you can kind of put two and two together. You don't need an advanced math degree to kind of figure that out. So hopefully, I mean, not hopefully, it is being done. You got to imagine that you'd like to see some more responsibility being taken if it's for the reasons that we're kind of putting together here, Dan.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing you want is a pointed response. You want to just hear an answer, right? And I think it's similar to what we saw in Youngstown, right? Where you, at the very least in that situation, you got some sort of answer to the accusation, right? To what occurred. That's what you want to see. You want to see follow up in terms of just, hey, are we denying it? Hey, are we investigating it? What is the process of what is occurring to respond to the actions that are being alleged? That is the key. I've conversed with Darren Eller before. When Casper fake hired me for a few weeks, I had talked to Darren and we had great conversations. I've never had a bad interaction with Darren Naylor. I've had nothing but positives with him. That doesn't mean that it's impossible for someone when they coach to not be that person. We've seen it a zillion times in sports, not just in the game of hockey, right? So it's interesting to see. I'm interested to see kind of the response to this from the league itself. I'm interested to see kind of the follow up from the organization. I know Coach Zangs is a beauty. He's a guy who's going to work hard behind the bench as well. I know Wes Musio is a guy who's investing himself and investing as much as he can into that program and into whatever program he runs. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, for me, the jury's out for me. I'm hearing things from all over on both sides of this argument. I'm hearing things on both sides of this coin. But the biggest thing to remind coaches, the biggest thing to remind owners, your players matter. Their safety matters. Folks, if you have issues, if you're with any team, whether it's a team we work with directly or a team we don't, if you have issues and you think they need to be addressed, you reach out. We can help. We can facilitate the same as some of the other means that these stories have made their way to. We're happy to assist. We're happy to help however we can, no matter the league, no matter the place, no matter the level.
Yeah, 100%. And we'll keep our eyes out for any response from the team, any response from the NCDC, or really any response potentially from other teams that are out west. I mean, those NCDC West teams, they're on an island. They're kind of in a way almost like their own little league out there, right? So there is an opportunity for them to potentially step up as well, but we will certainly keep everyone updated on anything new that comes out. And we're going to go to a quick break, because after the break, we're going to go to a conversation that Dan K had with a fan who is very interested in how we do our power rankings. And we're back, and this is why I think we love the fan interaction so much. We're getting a ton of fan interaction from, it feels like, every league right now. Some great discussions from the NAW, of course, some incredible discussions from the EHL. This one, a question that came in to you, Dan, pointed towards our USPHL power rankings, but I think that the answer is generic to how we do our power rankings in general, which, especially since the USPHL has released their Cratch rankings, has stirred up a lot of questions for you. I know I've gotten a ton as well. So why don't you dive into this conversation?
Well, we'll start with, I have been shouted at, not angrily at me, but shouted at about Cratch ratings by every coach who has encountered me in the last 2 weeks. They don't get it. They don't like it. They don't enjoy it. And what I've continued to explain to them is Cratch is created, the C in Cratch is collegiate. It's created for college hockey. At the NCAA Division I level, there is not a large drop-off between top and bottom in terms of the overall athlete on the ice. Everyone playing is a Division One level NCAA athlete. That's why Cratch was usable for them. It's not something they are using day in and day out because even they know it is not the best way to decide how things work. It's why Cratch, the BCS, all of these things were thrown into the garbage can because they don't work. They don't work. They don't work. They do not work. I don't care what statistician tells you Cratch is a great way to do it, but telling me that you got 10 gazillion points for the Metro Jets and in third place has 7 is wild to look at for a user and impossible to understand for a parent. So the question that came in from Liz McCune, a wonderful fan, awesome parent, she reached out and she asked the question of just how do our power rankings work? Why do they work the way they do? And how do we put them together? So what I explained was this. We try to eliminate ourselves as much as we can, but at the end of the day, you can't perfectly do that. So what do? You have to create a power ranking that's based on strength of schedule. How do you deem that? You deem it on play against one another, right? You go to head. You look at how teams fare. If the Eels are 2-0 against the Tampa Bay Juniors, the Eels are better than the Juniors right now. That's what a power ranking is. It is recency bias, right? That's the next word, recency bias. You take the year-long catalog of performance, but you focus heavily and put a weight on the previous 2 weeks of action leading up to that power ranking. That is why our power rankings will be every 2 weeks throughout the season, because you take those 2 weeks and you put an extra weight on the numbers coming from there. Next up, after that weight on that, you have to look at what conferences do, or what divisions is what we call them in the USPHL Premier. There are 9 to 10 divisions of hockey now in the USPHL Premier. There is no way for those 10 divisions to all play each other because the league, the executive committee, got rid of the showcase in Boston that everyone used to go to and used to get that cross-pollination, which made Cratch somewhat usable. If you cross-pollinate like that, Cratch becomes better. Since you don't do that, we also add in a factor for divisional strength. That divisional strength comes from your division's record against other divisions. For example, last year, the worst division in cross-divisional play was the Northwest. They had a sub 100 winning percentage outside of their division. So that puts them into a lower weighted class than, let's say, the Southeast, which had an over 700% win percentage against other divisions in cross-divisional play last year. That is how that works. Those numbers all come together. And then the human eye gets involved at the very end and goes, look, this is wild. There might be a time where a team like Lake Tahoe kind of sits outside the top 10. We look and we go, you know what? They've beaten Fresno, who have been in our top 10 a bunch. They've played tough out there. They've got the most points in the entire USPHL Premier. How do you leave them out? And they slot up a bit further, right? So that all of those factors come together and create the Dan K Show Power Rankings. We have a version that is our shredder, where we can just put in the numbers and spit it out. And I think we might start doing that for folks at home just to prove it and just to show what we do. And we keep it to a 1 to 10 scale so that it's not 1,001 to 11 between 1 and 2. It's the dumbest system in the world. Cratch doesn't work. And they're charging for it in youth hockey with one big organization that runs the league.
It's interesting, too, because when you look at the way that we do our power rankings, the human element, a lot of times we will put in whatever last place, whether it's 10, 5, 20, 25 last year, we'll have some prove-it spots, right? For teams that maybe are on the bubble, but teams that have been really good lately. Teams that have a cool matchup coming up that we want to see and we think might win, right? But we also take into account teams that do play in divisions that are not as strong. It used to be called the Wilkes-Barre effect, right? When that division was not as consistent as it is now. The last year, it was partially the Connecticut Junior Rangers, right? A team that, yes, their strength of schedule wasn't what you would have liked to see, but they were winning every game, and they ended up winning the championship. So, back off a little bit. But
and our numbers at the end of the year had them at number 1, and every single person who reached out that wasn't from Connecticut told us we were crazy, told us we were wrong. We talked to a guy who's now a deputy commissioner. He goes, can't factor in that stuff. That's not how it works. And apparently it's how it works because Connecticut wound up winning.
Exactly. So that's why there is a little bit of human element. With all automated processes, including AI graphics creation, there has to be a human at the end of the chain that says, this feels weird or this doesn't feel right. Liz was asking us specifically about Vernal, a team that is good year after year, but plays in a division that, like you said, Dan, doesn't have a good cross-divisional record. So eventually, if they keep winning and they keep winning the games they have to win at a very impressive clip, they might crack it, right? There might be something there. But the history of that division, unfortunately, makes it really tough for a team like that, especially now that the rankings are only the top 10.
Was that on purpose? Crack it?
It was.
It's the dumbest system in the world. It is. I can't stand it. Someone who understands the math of it. The amount of people I watch get it explained, Cratch, and they go, I don't understand, but I'm glad you do. And it's just like, it doesn't work at this level. There is too much of a discrepancy between play capability at the tier 3 level of hockey. There's too much discrepancy at the tier 2 level for Cratch to work. When you get to NCAA Division I, when you get to if you did it in the NHL, Cratch would be perfect. I guarantee you. The math is great. It would be off by maybe 1. If we did an NHL theory for Cratch, it would be perfect. They all play each other. There's balance. They're all the same level of athlete. It would be even better than it is for college. It should be the Cranha, the NHL system. But instead, we sit here with Cratch. I wish everyone luck. I hope it goes in your favor. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we hope it works. We want things to go well. We just don't think that it will. So, Liz, thank you for the incredible, insightful question. This was another comment that we got from them. Keep up the good work. Love the show. Love the transparency. I'm a big supporter. If you want your questions answered on the air, all you got to do is ask. I started my career as a teacher, and I always used to tell my students, there's no such thing as a dumb question, because if you're asking it, odds are someone else has the same question. So reach out to us. Let us know what you want answered on the show, and we'll answer it. Welcome back into the Empty Net. We just finished getting on about how we want you to ask us questions. Well, even more folks asked us questions. That's what the Empty Net is for. It's late in the game. We've pulled our netminder because we want to get as many forwards on the ice as we possibly can. Dan, one of our favorites right now in the Empty Net game is coming to us from X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. It's Tanner, and he had a good one about the Null this week.
He asked us about the hotter than a fox in a forest fire Shreveport Mudbugs. The Mudbugs don't just have my favorite name in the game. They are also playing lights out hockey right now. 5 of their last 6 W's. They took it to Amarillo. Those Wranglers were wrangled in by the Mudbugs. This team right now, they play fast, man. They play with skill. They play in space. They create. It's a tough environment to play in down there in the Mudbug territory. This is a team right now. They're traveling well. They're playing at home well. The power play's clicking for them. It's when a team's special teams is going as well as it is for the Mudbugs right now, they're tough out. I would say watch out next Wednesday for the potential Mudbugs crack of the top 5. We'll see.
Potentially. I mean, you love to see the Mudbugs taking 2 of 3 away from Amarillo. Dan, taking 3 of 4 away from Amarillo there. I would say the Mudbugs are hot as a mudbug in August potentially, but they are certainly piling up wins.
Hot as a mudbug crawling into my pot of jambalaya. That's how hot he is.
I would say that the Mudbugs right now are really looking at the next 4 games, and nothing against the Odessa Jackalopes or the Oklahoma Warriors, but you're looking at 4 games on the road, Oklahoma and Odessa. If I'm Shreveport, I'm looking at 8 points. I mean, with the way the momentum is carrying in their direction, I'm looking at trying to get, I would say, at least 6, going for 8, because then you got to go up against Corpus Christi. That's always a tough out. But yeah, I think for Shreveport right now, the momentum's on their side. Mudbugs are firing ahead.
Mudbugs are firing ahead. Lucas, do we have anything else in the Empty Net?
We had a great interview this week on the Ice Level podcast, one of the podcasts under the Dan K Show Presents umbrella, but quickly establishing itself as its own very popular source for NCAA coverage. Hosted by James Blenneau, Jacob Sherriss joined James this week for a Big Ten hockey breakdown. They looked at the Big Ten Conference and they shined a spotlight on it. There were some interesting moments in Big Ten hockey the last week, that conference really just getting play started over the last few days here. So, I mean, you should go over and listen to it, and you should follow it. It's Ice Level with James Blenneau. It's on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow at blenneau.media. That's going to get you over to James's Instagram page. That's going to be the best place to see every time a new Ice Level comes out. Going to be great college, NCAA, Division I, and occasionally some Division III content all season long.
Jacob Sherriss, a man breaking down the Big Ten for Dan K this past week. More spent breaking down about a frog in his sink. Those are the things that we cover here on the Dan K Show. If you're not watching Ice Time, you're missing out. Let's call it Ice Time.
Ooh, guess who doesn't watch the show, by the way?
Ice
if
Level.
You're not watching the show,
it's Ice Level.
You're missing out.
It's time for Ice Level. It's time for it. It's time for it. I guess that's when I say goodbye. So long. Farewell. Vida Zane, goodbye. Goodbye.
Doesn't even watch the show.
In case on a mic, he's going to screw up one of his own shows.